Welcome to True Crime Threads. Today we explore the shocking murder of a woman who discovered her father-in-law's dark secrets. Marina had always dreamed of a beautiful marriage, one that would whisk her away from her past and offer her the life she'd yearned for. When she met Evan, she believed she'd found exactly that. He was attentive, with a quiet charm and a dedication that endeared him to his family and friends alike. Evan's family, the Lanes, were well respected and carried an air of tradition and wealth, especially his father, Thomas. Thomas Lane was a towering figure in their town, not just physically but socially. He owned several businesses, held a notable position in the community, and was known for his generosity at local events. But beyond his public persona, Marina felt something unsettling about him. Thomas had an intimidating presence, a powerful charisma that made everyone feel as though they were under his watchful eye. He would occasionally let his gaze linger too long on certain women, and it wasn't the look of an ordinary family man. Marina noticed these glances, sometimes directed at young waitstaff or distant family friends at gatherings. What struck her most was how comfortable Thomas seemed, as if his actions were unremarkable or invisible to those around him. Marina chalked it up to her own imagination at first. After all, no one else seemed disturbed by his behavior, and Evan certainly hadn't mentioned anything. However, over time her feelings became harder to dismiss. At one family gathering, Marina observed Thomas with a young employee from his office. The woman looked uncomfortable, forcing smiles and polite laughter as Thomas chatted and gestured with the familiarity of someone much closer than a boss. Marina watched as Thomas placed his hand on the young woman's arm in a manner that felt both proprietary and possessive. She couldn't help but notice the fleeting look of discomfort in the woman's eyes before she quickly masked it with a smile. Marina's stomach churned, but she was at a loss for what to do. Bringing it up would be awkward, and she had no proof that anything inappropriate was happening. In the following weeks, Marina noticed subtle patterns emerging. When Thomas visited her and Evan, he would occasionally brush up against her or stand too close, his hand lingering just a bit too long in a way that made her feel uncomfortable. She began to wonder if her suspicions were paranoia, or if she was genuinely onto something. But the evidence was intangible, a series of impressions she couldn't quite piece together. Evan's nonchalance about his father only added to her confusion. He seemed oblivious to Thomas's behavior, brushing off Marina's mild inquiries with a laugh or a dismissive comment. It was this mix of unspoken tension and her own unease that planted the first seeds of doubt in Marina's mind. Her father-in-law's hidden life was a mystery, but one she could no longer ignore. One evening, while helping Thomas prepare for an upcoming family event at his home, Marina found herself alone in his study, looking for candles he'd asked her to retrieve. The room was grand and meticulously organized, with rich leather furniture and bookshelves filled with rows of old, carefully curated books. She searched through the drawers in the closet, opening boxes and tins as she scanned for anything resembling the candles. But instead, she stumbled upon something odd, a plain, unmarked box hidden toward the back of a drawer. Curiosity sparked, Marina pulled it out and removed the lid, only to be met with an assortment of items she could never have expected. Inside were letters, photographs, and personal belongings of women she didn't recognize. Some of the photos showed women much younger than Thomas in intimate or compromising situations. As she sifted through the items, Marina realized these weren't just casual acquaintances or business associates. These women were involved with Thomas, likely romantically, though the nature of their relationship seemed far from ordinary. One picture particularly caught her eye, a young woman who looked eerily like Marina herself. She felt a chill down her spine as she wondered if it was a coincidence or if Thomas sought out women with a similar appearance. She continued to dig through the box, uncovering various documents and receipts for gifts, luxury jewelry, designer clothes, and even payments for apartments. It was clear that Thomas had provided significant financial support for these women, keeping them well hidden from his family and public life. But what was most disturbing was the tone of the letters. Some expressed love, others hinted at dependency or pressure, and one or two even contained veiled threats if the women ever spoke of their involvement with him. Marina's mind raced as she put together the implications. This wasn't just a man with a few indiscretions, this was a carefully orchestrated double life, one involving manipulation, control, and secrecy. It dawned on her that Thomas had gone to great lengths to conceal his affairs, and there was a reason for it. If these women ever spoke out, it could destroy him, his reputation, and perhaps the family's entire image. Trembling, she closed the box, her heart pounding as she glanced toward the study's open door, worried Thomas might return and catch her at any moment. But in that moment, her concern for her own safety was overshadowed by something else, a grim determination to understand the truth. The disturbing contents of the box ignited a fierce curiosity within her, a drive to dig deeper, to confirm what she suspected was a web of secrets carefully maintained by a man she had once viewed as just another successful businessman. Marina left the study that night with more questions than answers, but also a gnawing sense that she had touched something dark, something that would change everything. Marina's curiosity turned into a compulsion as she became increasingly obsessed with uncovering more about Thomas's secret affairs. Each new discovery deepened her shock and horror, yet she couldn't pull herself away. She spent hours searching through public records and social media, following any hint of connection she could find. Over time, she managed to track down a few of the women from the photos in Thomas's box, each encounter providing chilling insights into his manipulative nature. When she reached out to these women, most were hesitant, reluctant to speak about their relationship with him. Some outright refused, as though even the mention of his name brought them discomfort and fear. However, one woman finally offered Marina a glimpse into the unsettling reality of Thomas Lane. The woman, a former employee of Thomas, confessed that she'd been involved with him for years, but the relationship was nothing like she had anticipated. According to her, Thomas was charming and generous at first, sweeping her off her feet with promises and gifts. But as the relationship progressed, he became increasingly controlling, monitoring her every move and dictating whom she could and couldn't see. Over time, the woman felt trapped, coerced into keeping their affair a secret, under the constant threat that her reputation and her life could be ruined if she dared to speak out. She hinted that Marina's husband, Evan, might have known about his father's affairs all along and had chosen to ignore them, perhaps to protect the family's reputation or out of his own fear. This revelation struck Marina deeply, igniting a sense of betrayal she hadn't anticipated. She'd married Evan believing he was honest and kind, only to learn that he might have knowingly turned a blind eye to his father's predatory behavior. Suddenly, everything in her marriage felt like a lie. Each affectionate moment she'd shared with Evan, each family gathering, seemed tainted by the knowledge that he had kept her in the dark about Thomas's dark secrets. Determined to confirm the woman's story, Marina pushed further, focusing her attention on her husband's actions. She started paying attention to subtle hints in Evan's behavior, noticing the way he would tense up whenever she brought up his father or the family business. She began searching their home for any documents or evidence that might tie Evan to his father's secrets. In one of Evan's old work files, she found an email thread between him and his father discussing payments to certain individuals, payments that had been carefully disguised as business expenses. With this newfound knowledge, Marina faced a heartbreaking choice: confront Evan and risk the possibility of pushing him away, or continue investigating silently, knowing that she was getting closer to a truth she might wish she had never uncovered. Torn and overwhelmed, Marina resolved to gather as much evidence as possible before making any decisions. But as she continued to dig, she couldn't shake the growing feeling of dread, the sense that she was being watched, as if someone knew she was piecing together secrets meant to stay buried. Marina couldn't keep her silence any longer. She decided to confront Evan, hoping he would reassure her or, at the very least, give her some clarity on what was happening. She waited until an evening when they were alone, choosing her words carefully as she brought up the discoveries she'd made about his father. As she expected, Evan's reaction was immediate, but not in the way she had hoped. He dismissed her concerns, brushing them off with a coldness she hadn't anticipated. He warned her not to interfere, saying it would be best if she let the matter go. The warning in his voice felt like a slap, and Marina was left speechless, a pit of fear forming in her stomach. This wasn't the man she thought she knew. That night, lying awake next to Evan, Marina felt an overwhelming sense of isolation. She had crossed an invisible line, and she couldn't turn back. In the days that followed, her anxiety grew as she started noticing strange things happening around her. She would catch glimpses of people who seemed to be watching her, cars that seemed to appear wherever she went. Marina's phone would ring with calls that went silent when she picked up, and her social media accounts began getting strange messages warning her to stop what she was doing. Her once peaceful life had turned into a waking nightmare, and she was starting to feel the walls close in. Her growing paranoia led her to take extra precautions, documenting everything she'd discovered about Thomas and Evan's connection to the affairs and strange payments. She stored copies of emails, photos, and evidence she had uncovered, hiding them in secure places, just in case something happened to her. She reached out to her closest friend, confiding her fears and suspicions. Her friend, alarmed by the level of detail Marina shared, urged her to contact the authorities. But Marina was conflicted, afraid that if she went to the police, the family's power and influence might keep the truth buried and her own life might be in danger. As days passed, the subtle intimidation escalated. Marina's bank accounts were suddenly frozen, leaving her stranded and unable to access her own money. Her credit cards were inexplicably declined, and her phone service was disconnected without explanation. She was left isolated, her options narrowing as Thomas's reach seemed to close in on every aspect of her life. It was clear that the family was tightening its grip on her, cutting off every means of escape or communication. One night, while Marina was home alone, she heard a sound from outside a car pulling up and idling just outside the house. Her heart raced as she peeked through the curtains, catching a glimpse of a dark figure sitting in the driver's seat. She backed away, her mind racing with the realization that the intimidation had taken a much darker turn. As the car slowly drove away, Marina knew this was a final warning. She felt trapped, with no one to turn to and no way out. What had started as an innocent curiosity had become a deadly game, and she was beginning to understand just how dangerous the truth could be. Marina's disappearance sent a wave of shock and fear through her small circle of friends and family. It was her best friend who first raised the alarm, worried after days of not hearing from Marina. When the police arrived at Marina's home, they found unsettling evidence of a struggle, a broken vase, a misplaced chair, and Marina's phone left abandoned on the floor. This wasn't just a missing persons case, it was clear that something much darker had happened to her. Her friend, devastated, disclosed everything Marina had told her in their last conversations about the box of evidence, Thomas's affairs, and her growing suspicions that Evan had known everything. The investigation unfolded rapidly. When the police began to dig into Thomas's background, they uncovered a complex web of relationships and financial transactions, linking him to several young women who were reportedly his business partners or consultants. But these relationships had clear, disturbing patterns of manipulation and secrecy. The police soon identified some of these women, many of whom were willing to speak out now that they were no longer afraid. Their testimonies painted a picture of Thomas as a powerful figure with a penchant for control, using his wealth to ensure silence and compliance from those around him. As the authorities continued, they stumbled upon a startling revelation, evidence of communications between Thomas and Evan, indicating they had known of Marina's suspicions. Their correspondence had grown frantic in the days leading up to her disappearance. Emails and messages showed Evan's mounting fear that Marina would expose his father's dark side, and disturbingly, he seemed willing to go to any lengths to protect his family's reputation. These findings cast a heavy shadow of suspicion on Evan, making him a prime person of interest in Marina's case. Days later, in a shocking twist, Marina's body was discovered in a secluded wooded area outside of town. The scene revealed clear signs of foul play, and it became apparent that her death had been anything but accidental. The news spread quickly, shocking the community, who had once seen the Lanes as a model family. The scandal intensified as the press uncovered details of Thomas's hidden life, and the full extent of his affairs became public. Friends, neighbors, and community members expressed their disbelief that someone they'd respected could be involved in something so horrifying. With mounting evidence, both Thomas and Evan were arrested. In court, the prosecution laid out a devastating case against them, arguing that they had orchestrated Marina's murder to keep her from exposing their secrets. Witnesses testified about Thomas's controlling relationships, and former employees admitted to being pressured into silence. Evan's own complicity was revealed through his attempts to keep Marina isolated in her final days, freezing her accounts and cutting her off from any support. The trial captivated the public, and the courtroom was filled with people awaiting justice for Marina. Ultimately, Thomas and Evan were convicted, their life sentences marking the end of the Lane family's reign in the town. Marina's tragic story left an indelible mark on the community, reminding everyone of the devastating cost of unchecked power and the dark secrets that can lie hidden in even the most respected families.